Good morning, students. Hope you all are fine and studying well. So, continuing with the topic of biology section, chapter 6, that is life processes. In the previous lecture, we have studied about digestion. So, digestion is required for our body so that we can digest food, and the food is assimilated in the body so that we can get energy to perform various life processes. And this food is also used as the material for growth and repair of the body. Since this food is used by the body, there is also another process which is involved. That means from the food which we eat, it converts into glucose. Then the energy which we use or we need to do our daily functions, or which our body used for growth and repair, and to perform basic life functions, we need energy. That energy is made by the process of respiration. So, in the previous classes, you have learned respiration a number of times. Respiration is easy, that means intake of oxygen and breathing out of CO2. So, that is a simple definition of respiration. But respiration can be of two types, that is, internal and external. The external respiration is simple when we intake oxygen from the atmosphere and then we exhale out the CO2 gas. That is called as the external respiration. But in the internal respiration, it is done in the cell, in the mitochondria, where glucose is used along with the oxygen to make the energy. So today we'll be learning about the process, how respiration is done, and what are the types of respiration. So a basic definition of respiration would be the process of releasing energy that forms from the food is called as respiration. That is, the process of releasing energy from food is called as respiration. It involves taking in oxygen into the cell, using it for releasing energy by burning food and then eliminating the waste products. The waste product is CO2 and water from the body. Okay, now this process of releasing the energy is called as respiration. Now what happens is that food plus oxygen gives CO2 and water and energy. Okay, here food, that means food means glucose, and oxygen, which is also very important. Without oxygen, respiration won't take place. So this is a respiration, that is the internal respiration, which carries in the cell. Then CO2 is released along with water and energy. There is a simple activity in your NCERT book, that is, if you're having your books, you can see them from your books, or if you don't have your books, you can also download some PDF drives, files with the help of Google. All the books of NCERT are there and you can study with them. So in the activity, you have to take 2 test tubes. Into 1 test tube, you will fill lime water. I hope you all remember what is lime water. So lime water turns, when reacted with CO2, it turns the CO2 gas turns the lime water milky. So when you will pass any air with a help of a syringe into the lime water, it does not change its color. It will turn slightly curdling color, but when you will pass the air from your nostril to the other test tube, you will find that the lime water turns milky. That means when you breathe out, you also breathe CO2 gas, and CO2 gas is responsible for turning lime water milky. So that means that when we respire, when we breathe in and out, we take oxygen inside and we breathe out CO2, and which is happening in the cell. So respiration is essential for life because it provides energy for carrying out all the life processes which are necessary to keep the organisms alive. So respirations takes place inside the cell, obviously, inside the cell, inside the mitochondria. And respirations are of two types, that is aerobic respiration and and aerobic respiration. Now, aerobic respiration is the respiration in which the oxygen is required, and in the case of anaerobic respiration, no oxygen is used in this, without oxygen. So we have learned that respiration is a process when we take oxygen in and when we exhale CO2. No, that's not only the respiration. Respiration can also take in place with the absence or with the very little oxygen. So basically respiration is just a releasing energy, the process in which energy is released no matter what gas we are using. That is called respiration. So before I start before I explain these two topics in detail, I would like you to explain some basic terms which will be helpful for you in this lecture, that is about the currency unit of this energy, that is ATP. I hope you remember that ATP. So we'll be learning about that first and then we'll move ahead. So when the respiration takes place, that time the energy is released by consuming the simple food that is called as glucose. So when glucose combined with the oxygen, it forms energy called as ATP. So not only ATP, there are different terms which you will be learning, that are ATP, ATP, ADP and phosphate. Now ATP you have learned already that it's adenosine triphosphate. Okay, and ADP stands for adenosine diphosphate. The only difference between these two is one is triphosphate and the other one is diphosphate. That means this adenosine triphosphate will be having 3 phosphate groups and this will be having 2 phosphate group. Now this phosphate, what is this? Now phosphate is an inorganic phosphate compound which contains a phosphate group. That means when phosphorus combines with oxygen, it forms phosphate. So this is a inorganic compound. Organic compound means which contains carbon in them, like glucose, C6H12O6. So it is having carbon, so it is an organic compound, and all the things which do not have carbon in them are called as inorganic compounds, which are single compounds like salts. So this is a inorganic phosphate, which is also denoted as P or either as Pi, small I, that means inorganic. That means phosphate. P stands for phosphate and I stands for inorganic. So this is these three things, and the phosphate which you write, it's this. So the basic difference between this ATP and ADP is that this ATP gives us very high energy and ADP gives us very low energy content. Okay, and both of these are found inside the cell. They are in the cell. This phosphate is also in the cell and ATP is also in the cell. So all these things are in the cell. So we can also know that these things are in the cell, but they are formed in different manner. Like when energy is released during the respiration, it used to make ATP molecules. Okay, when in the cellular respiration, when the energy is released, that means when glucose will combine with the oxygen, then the energy will be released, and ATP here is the currency unit of the energy. Like currency means it is very essential for us to buy our important things, our daily basis things. So if we don't have a currency of that country, we won't be able to do anything. So that's very important. So that is the currency unit. That means in the body or in the cells, the energy is stored in the form of ATP. Okay, and from ATP, that means ATP is made from ADP. It happens like that. ADP plus phosphate plus energy gives ATP. Now ADP also uses energy to form ATP. I will explain you. Just listen carefully and then I will explain you with the help of a equation. This ATP which is found in the cell, it is also made from this ATP. So ADP also is helpful to form ATP. I think you are confusing a little bit, so I'll just explain you like this. This ADP, which is adenosine diphosphate, combines with phosphate plus energy. Now this energy is used, which is in the cell in the form of ATP. That means ATP will produce energy, okay, which is produced by the respiration, and then it will form ATP. So this is an endothermic process. That means it is requiring energy. I hope you remember endothermic and exothermic. So this is a reaction which is endothermic. That means ADP, because it has only two phosphate group in this, will along with the phosphate plus plus energy will form ATP. Okay, so now the energy is stored in the cell in the form of ATP, because this energy is just ATP. So once again we'll move to this. The energy released during respiration is used to make ATP molecules from ADP and inorganic phosphate. Okay, now ADP combines with inorganic phosphate by absorbing the energy released during the respiration. So the energy is also used, which is released during respiration, and then the ATP molecule is formed. So this is one reaction. So what happens on the next thing is that when the cell needs energy, now this is the ATP formed. When the cell needs energy, then ATP can be broken down using water and to release energy. So when ADP combines with the inorganic phosphate by absorbing the energy, that time the ATP is broken down into again ADP and phosphate. Like this is a reverse process. If we'll see this reaction and these reaction, these have some similarity. Like we have just reversed the reaction. Okay, so here was ADP plus phosphate plus energy gives ATP, and here is ATP gives ADP, phosphate and energy. So this ATP is broken down into ADP, phosphate and energy, which is used to do other functions. So like this ADP is stored in the body or in the cells, so it can be used further when it is required, and the energy equivalent is 30.5 kilojoules more is released in this process. Like too much of energy, this energy, the value of this energy, it's 30.5 kilojoules per mole. So this energy is calculated in kilojoules, and this is released in the form by ATP, and ATP is also responsible for carrying out all the endothermic process, like all the process which are used or which absorbs the energy in the form of heat or in any form. So this is produced by this ATP, and ADP can be converted into ATP by absorbing the energy, okay, and during the respiration, and then ATP converts back into ADP by releasing the energy, which is to be used by the cell again and again. So ADP will use energy which is released from this ATP and from ATP, and then ATP again will form ADP. This is not very elaborate in your NCERT book, but just learn these things and difference in both the things, because it is not that important, but yeah, it is quite a topic in your NCERT. I have not seen questions coming of these, but please do take care of this topic as well. So this is very important in the context with the chapter. So now these are few notes, that means which you will be using in this lecture. Now glucose, you all know that glucose formula is C6H12O6. Okay, and this glucose contains 6 carbon atoms and 12 hydrogen atoms and 6 oxygen atoms. This is the glucose, simple. So the oxidation of glucose to pyruvic acid. Now this is a new thing for you. Pyruvic acid. We'll be explaining you about this pyruvic acid. What is this? This is also an acid which has 3 carbon atoms in it. And pyruvic acid, we also can call it pyruvate, Pyruvate. And the process of conversion of glucose into pyruvic acid or pyruvate is called as glycolysis. So we'll be learning about there are two different reactions which takes place during the respiration. That is, one takes place in the cytoplasm and the other takes place in the mitochondria. So which is taking place in the cytoplasm, that means cytoplasm is also capable of performing respiration. So in the cytoplasm, this glucose is converted into pyruvic acid or pyruvate, and then that pyruvate, if it gets oxygen, it gets converted into ATP, or if it does not get oxygen, then it can be converted in simple into the other other ATP, but that will be lesser in number. And along with that, different products will be formed along with the CO2, which is a part of an anaerobic respiration. So pyruvic acid or pyruvate is just a 3-carbon atom, that is C3H4O3. Please learn these formulas. That means glucose is C6H12O6, pyruvic acid either CH3COCOOH, or just it will be an easy one for you to remember, it is C3H4 and O3. Okay, now the oxygen is present in the cell, then pyruvate is completely oxidized. That means when the oxygen is present in the cell, that time there is a complete oxidation, and it is converted into the energy, and CO2 gas is released and ATP is formed. Okay, so if oxygen is not present in the cell, then pyruvate is converted into ethanol and CO2, or in the lactic acid. So these two things which we'll be learning. So lactic acid is the acid which is present in curd especially. So this is 3-carbon atom compound. Again, like pyruvate, it's also 3-carbon atom compound, but it is C3H6O3. So please learn these formulas. Now moving to this aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Here's a little flow chart for you people to understand is that respiration can be of two types. It's external and internal. Then again, external is simple breathing. That means taking in the oxygen and exhaling the CO2. And external is of again two types, that is aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. So aerobic respiration takes place inside the mitochondria, where glucose is combined with oxygen and produces CO2, water and ATP, a lot of ATP, which gives us a lot of energy. But if there is no oxygen, like I've said here, if oxygen is not present, then it will be an anaerobic respiration, in which the food will be converted. Food means glucose. Glucose is converted into pyruvic acid or pyruvate, and then if there is no oxygen, either it will be formed in the case it will be converted into lactic acid or alcohol. So if it is a animal cell, it will be converted into lactic acid, and if it is a plant cell can be also fungi like yeast, so it will convert into alcohol. That means alcoholic fermentation. So aerobic respiration takes place in cytoplasm. Okay, so mitochondria only perform the respiration in which oxygen is involved. I hope it's clear. Now coming to the aerobic respiration. The aerobic respiration is the respiration which uses the oxygen. So it is called as aerobic respiration. Here is a little equation. I hope you can see this. Now glucose is the food which we get after all the digestion and absorption. So it gets assimilated in the body. So glucose, it will undergo glycolysis. GLYCOLYSIS. Glycolysis will be performed in the cytoplasm. CYTOPLASM, in the cytoplasm. Okay, then glucose will be only one molecule. Then because it will take place in the cytoplasm, not in the mitochondria, glucose will be converted into pyruvate. Pyruvate means pyruvic acid. Okay, so again 2 mole pyruvic acid will be formed. So when it's aerobic respiration, that means it will have oxygen. So oxygen is there, so it will take place in the mitochondria. So the CO2 gas will be formed, water and ATP. But please remember this term, that is 6CO2, 6CO2, 6H2O, because this will be a balanced reaction. If it is C6H12O6, then it will be 6CO2, 6H2 and 38 ATP molecules will be formed. That means energy is very high. Okay, so this breaking down of glucose during aerobic respiration, and most of the living organisms carry aerobic respiration. So coming to the anaerobic respiration, this respiration takes place without the oxygen and it is called as anaerobic respiration. Here glucose, again one molecule, will convert into pyruvate. So again the conversion of glucose into pyruvic acid or pyruvate is called as glycolysis, which takes place in the cytoplasm. And when it is the anaerobic respiration, that means there is absence of O2, absence of oxygen, which will take place in plant or animals. Here this is for plants. So yeast, it will undergo fermentation. It will not happen in the mitochondria but in the cytoplasm itself. Then it will be converted into this ethanol, C2H5OH. Okay, ethanol plus 2CO2 plus only 2 ATP molecules will be formed. So in the aerobic respiration, a lot of energy is formed, that is 38 ATP. But in the case of anaerobic respiration, only 2 ATP molecules are formed, and along with that ethanol is formed. But here was no ethanol, only CO2 and water. But here it's, instead of water, it's ethanol and CO2. That is why in the brewing industries, in the fermentation industries, they use yeast as the compound, as the basic culture to ferment the things, and it's called as alcoholic fermentation, because yeast will respire and it will form alcohol or ethanol. Okay, the microorganisms like yeast break down glucose food in ethanol and carbon dioxide and release energy. So this whole process is taking place in cytoplasm of the cell, but not in the mitochondria. Since there is no oxygen involved, so it will not undergo in the cytoplasm, but it will undergo only in the mitochondria. Okay, so after this there is a third one which I've told you. I've explained you this. That in the case of this anaerobic, there will be again 2 types, that is alcoholic and lactic acid. So we have studied about alcohol and we'll be doing this lactic acid. So when there is in the human beings, like I've said, that lactic acid will be formed in the animals, and alcohol will form in the case of plants. So in the humans, we also undergo sometimes an aerobic respiration. So usually we always require oxygen to respire, but sometimes inside our body, sometimes there is absence of oxygen. We need oxygen very suddenly. So in that case, our body is not able to supply the oxygen. So that time when there is no oxygen supplied in the body, the cells undergo an aerobic respiration. Like when a sports person is doing a vigorous activity or running, that time the muscles uses some extra energy, and in that time the blood is not able to supply the oxygen so quickly, that because it's not that quick, the speed that it is being consumed, so that time an aerobic respiration will take place. So in human beings, sometimes energy is also obtained by an aerobic respiration, which takes place in our muscles during vigorous physical exercise, which when oxygen gets used up faster in the muscle cells. Then can be supplied in the blood. So when the oxygen cannot reach to the cell too fast, that time the body or the muscle cells will undergo the anaerobic respiration. So this is glucose, again one molecule. It will undergo glycolysis, that is in the cytoplasm, and form pyruvate, that means pyruvic acid. And this here again there is absence of oxygen. So without oxygen, muscle tissue, in the muscle tissue it will take place. So lactic acid will be formed along with very little ATP energy will be formed. Since this in aerobic respiration, this brings about a very fast breakdown of the glucose from the lactic acid, and lactic acid accumulates in the muscles, and because of that the sportsmen feel cramp sometimes. You also would have experienced all these things, like in the anaerobic respiration by muscles, it brings about a partial breakdown of glucose to form lactic acid. So it will be a partial breakdown, not a full breakdown. Some of the glucose will be breakdown into lactic acid. So, and this lactic acid accumulates in the muscles, which causes the muscles cramps. So you will have a pain in your muscle, and it can be relieved by doing taking a massage or a hot water bath, so that the muscles are released and the blood flow is improved, so that you feel better. So this was the anaerobic respiration. Now next we are moving to the respiration in plants. So we have learned about that plants undergo photosynthesis. That means they make their own food by consuming CO2 gas, and they releases oxygen. But plants do undergo respiration when there is no CO2, especially at night. So how do they respire? So plants usually respire by the help of diffusion. That means diffusion is a process of moving the gases, especially gases, from its higher concentration to its lower concentration. So there are several pores in the plant body. Like if it's a herbaceous plant, it will having a stomata in the leaves as well as in the stems. So at night the oxygen will enter through the stomata, and in the there will be diffusion, and then they can take the oxygen and undergo photosynthesis respiration. But in the case of the harder woody plants, they have some other layers in the bark, that from there they can take the oxygen. And also in the roots they have some pores that called as lenticels, which allows them pore like structure in the roots, lenticels, which allows the air, that is oxygen, to come inside the plants. So, and stem and leaves have small openings which can through which that is called as stomata, through which the air can move inside. So these are the little steps, points, that are all the parts of plant, that is root, stem and leaves, perform respiration. So roots also have lenticels, and stems also have stomatas, and leaves also have stomatas. So they all perform respiration. And the other one is very little transport of gases is there. That means only from one part to the other, because it's very slow process in the they don't they don't need to make energy out of this respiration, because they make their food by the help of photosynthesis. But just they need to survive in the night time, so they use this. So very little transport of respiration, respiratory gases is done. That is very little oxygen they will take, not much, very less oxygen. They will not take oxygen like we are taking. They'll take very little oxygen, and the respiration in plants occur at a slow rate, and plants get oxygen by diffusion. So this is the respiration in plants. Now respiration in animals. So respiration in animals is also very different in different animals, like especially in the amoeba. Amoeba is a unicellular organism. So the respiration is obviously a little different than the other organism. Amoeba lives in water. So amoeba has a very thin membrane, cell membrane. So having a very thin cell membrane and being in the water enters in the amoeba cell through the semi-permeable cell membrane, and along with the water the oxygen also enters, and then the The amoeba will absorb the oxygen and it will mix with the other things, and then it will require the oxygen to digest its food, and the energy will be produced. So this is how amoeba undergoes respiration. It depends on simple diffusion of gases for breathing through its cell membrane from the water. So which gases, that is, which are present are in the water, and diffusion is insufficient to fulfill the oxygen requirement of the larger multicellular organism. Since diffusion cannot fulfill all the needs which bigger multicellular organisms require, so diffusion only takes place in the very microorganisms, that is amoeba. And paramecium also undergoes the same process of diffusion. Okay, so in terrestrial animals, those animals which live on land but they are also not very well developed, such as earthworm. Earthworm also exchange the gases by their moist skin. So they do have a very moist skin which is capable to absorb the oxygen from the atmosphere, and they're having a very good blood vessels which are just below the skin. So the oxygen which is absorbed by the moist skin enters directly through into the blood vessels. By that they can take their oxygen. Okay, so now they don't have a blood well, but they do have some fluid, so it is absorbed in there. So they absorb the oxygen from the atmosphere. After respiration in the aquatic animals. Now aquatic animals are designed differently because they reside in water, so they have a different process of respiration. That means they have different organs called as gills, which are used for respiration. And fishes breathe by taking water inside. There's an activity in your NCERT book that you have to go to an aquarium. You will be going after the lockdown ends. So if you want to go, and you'll see that whenever a fish opens its mouth, suddenly the gills which are present just below, just back of their eyes, they also opens. So when they open their mouth, the gills opens, and when they close their mouth, the gill closes. That means it is in a coordination. That means the water enters through the mouth and then it moves out from the gill. By this process, the blood vessels absorbs the oxygen which is present in the water, and that oxygen is used to undergo the respiration. Fishes has special organs for breathing called gills. So fish breathes by taking in water through its mouth and sending it out over to the gills. When water passes over the gills, the extracted dissolved oxygen, they extract the dissolved oxygen in the water, and it is then absorbed in the blood and then reaches to the other cells to perform the respiration. So this was about animals. So the last is respiration in human beings. So respiration is human being is very important. That is, in human beings, the respiration is just called done by breathing. Breathing is just the intake of oxygen and exhalation of CO2. That is, inhalation and exhalation is called as breathing. So respiratory system in human beings especially have a pair of lungs which are responsible for respiration, that we'll be learning. So two basic steps are there, that is breathing in and breathing out. When it is a little mechanism. That means when we breathe in, so I will explain you with the help of little diagram. Okay, here. So when we just have a look to this diagram. This is a structure of lungs. Here it's nose, below the nose it's nostrils, and here it's mouth cavity or buccal cavity. At the back of this nostrils it's nasal passage. This is called as pharynx. Okay, So here this is a food pipe. Okay, pharynx it's it is that with food pipe. Okay, and the other, you have learned that we are having two pipes, one windpipe and food pipe. So this is food pipe, but we don't have to do anything. It's digestive system, so it is respiratory system. So here it's larynx. Larynx is called as voice box, which causes the vibration of gases, air when we breathe in and breathe out. So there's a vibration of gases and then we can speak. So just below the larynx box, it's a trachea. Okay, so this is a tube like structure which has these rings, and at the end of the trachea it is dividing into two tubes, smaller tubes. It's called as bronchus. So bronchus will be when two tubes, because there are two tubes, and when we talk about single tube it will be called as bronchi. So both are same, bronchus and bronchi are same. When it's two it's called as bronchus, and basically they are two, and when it's one it's called as bronchi. Then again they are branched in simple tubes called as bronchioles. Okay, so these tubes, little small tubes, are called as bronchioles, and at the end of the tubes you would have seen that these are the small this sac like structure which are called as alveoli. Okay, so these are the alveoli which are sac like structure. So basically when we breathe in we intake the oxygen, so these sacs are filled, these little sacs are filled with the oxygen. So lungs does not keep oxygen in them. These sac or these alveoli keeps oxygen in them. So there is a mechanism of this respiration. When we breathe, here it's a diaphragm. I have missed it. It's called as diaphragm. Diaphragm. diaphragm, diaphragm. So what is this diaphragm? Diaphragm, okay, when we breathe in, the chest cavity becomes larger. Okay, and it suck the air inside. So these, when we breathe in, there is a these our lungs get expand when we breathe in, it gets expand, and this diaphragm, okay, lungs are inside the rib cage. Protects the lungs. At the end of the rib cage there is this ending which separates our lower portion. So it's a ending which is called as diaphragm. So it also can move. So when we breathe in, this diaphragm, this contract, and it comes in this lower position, it comes downward, and which increases the space in the chest cavity. So you would have heard about that we should breathe in. So we have to take a lot of air inside and breathe for a longer time, and then hold the air and then release it, so that when we'll do it slowly we will increase the space in our chest, so that we can absorb the more oxygen, so that all the sacs will be filled with the air, so that our body gets more oxygen. So when we breathe in, this diaphragm moves in the downward direction, causing more space, and these lungs also expands, chest expands, so we have more space, so the air comes in and these little sacs are filled with the air. Okay, then when we breathe out and when we exhale out the oxygen, our ribs relax, and then ribs cage, these are inside the ribs cage moves downward, and the diaphragm is also moving in the upward direction, everything is contraction. So this all the air will move out from these sac, and they will be empty and will breathe out the oxygen. So the chest cavity becomes small and air is pushed out the lungs. Like if we are blowing a balloon and we'll just crushing it, the air will come out, and when we'll pumping the air in, it will blow. So when it expands, the ribs cage expands and the lungs expand, so the air moves in and is filled in the sac, which is called as alveoli, and diaphragm also moves in the downward position, it contracts, and when we breathe out, it relaxes. So this is a simple phenomena of the respiration. I hope it's clear, and please do the homework in the homework section and make sure that you complete or submit your homework by the due date. You can also submit your homework before the due date, but you cannot submit your homework after the submission date is over. So please do your work carefully, read the notes, and if you have any problem, you can tell me, or you can write in your that description, which I will be helping. Till then, please stay safe and study hard. Thank you.